All right, so step two, find deals and analyze deals. Finding deals sounds probably fun, but it can also be frustrating. Analyzing deals is going to depend on what you like to do with numbers or not, and whether that is going to be something fun or not. But even if you love numbers, it can be frustrating in some cases if you have to look at 100 deals to get one. But I'm going to go through starting out, finding the deals. Leverage who you already know to help you build other relationships. Just the way it is. Go to networking events, have brokers, I already mentioned, make introductions. Maybe you have property management companies that are familiar with deals that they are actually managing, and the owner is going to sell that deal, things like that. Have other people introduce you. If it's true, you can say this. If you're even a limited partner in let's say a multifamily deal, you can say my partners and I own X, whatever, 1,000 units, right? And you are a partner in the deal. You're a limited partner. And now if the selling broker is like, well, hey, are you a general partner in that deal? Did you lead the deal? No, I mean, you need to be obviously truthful with them. But people downplay their investments as a limited partner. Sometimes it's totally fine and accurate and true to say my partners and I own 1,000 units, whatever it might be. So just keep that in mind. What makes the market ideal for investing? Population growth. I will caveat all this that the markets that are they get super hot, it's a general statement, are the markets that get super cold during some downturns. Meaning that yes, the super hot markets will have a great run up that is will far outperform a market that is not hot. Just reality. But again, generally speaking, those hot markets will also outperform in a negative way the decrease in value as the market tanks. And we've seen that over and over again. So be cautious of that. But population growth, right? Job growth, landlord friendly, easy to evict. People are like, this state is landlord friendly. Rarely, I would say that's the case. We can definitely say some states that are not landlord friendly, but lots of times, even in given states, it's at the county level. Let's just be real about it. Liberal counties are going to be more favorable to the resident, the tenant. It's reality. It's a fact. So be cautious of that. Even in some states we bought, we had no problems evicting, and then we bought in the same state in other counties, and we ran all kinds of problems. Take that on top of what happened during COVID and things like that, then you can be heading for a disaster. Low to medium housing cost, national average. Multiple industries. You don't really want to go to a single, a city that has like whatever it might be, oil. That's all they have there. Or they have like, they're military, only military, and half your tenants at your property is military. In fact, a lot of the lenders have issues, in some cases won't even loan on a deal if there's a certain concentration of X percent, typically 20% or more of something. So if it's military, as an example, if you had student housing, it's not a student housing lender, problems there, Section 8. Those type of things can all be problems. Maybe you have corporate leases, those type of things. So having multiple industries that way, hopefully if, one or two of the industries are down during the market, the other ones are performing okay, and you can, survive and do well. How difficult it is getting new supply meaning new units come online. This kind of sneaks up on you, and I say sneaks up on you because you know what's happening, right? Permits are being put out there to build new complexes, things like that. Lo and behold, fast forward a few years later, then all these units are coming online. Market's soft, which we saw, and these brand new complexes that are gorgeous, Class A, are trying to lease up, having a hard time giving significant concessions, meaning they're giving discounts, things like that, just to lease up because they need to lease it up. And now the Class B and C properties are suffering significantly because you can go move in Class A for the same price you can move into a Class B property. And that's where the supply can be a big issue. City investments is a city making investments. I mean, there's certain cities that you can just go to and see that there's a lot of investments even being made by the city. It's not always indication in my mind how well the city's doing. I mean, you could argue, well, isn't it because of the tax basis and things like that? If cities out building new libraries and things like that, I mean, I'm not being critical of that, but it's like, I mean, I'm sure why you spend money doing that, but that's great that the city's making investments. But if developers aren't there, developers in for a profit. Cities aren't necessarily always in for a profit, right? They're in for, you know, whatever reason they have. Some cases it's political motivation. Maybe someone gave a donation. But if developers are there developing or redeveloping certain city, whether it's office buildings, multifamily, redeveloping certain parts of the residential area, tearing down houses, rebuilding, things like that. They're in it for a profit, so it should mean something to you. Weather can be a huge indicator for where people are going to be moving for good markets. That could be, hey, it's just warmer. I like it. And as people get older and more people, retire and things like that, you're going to see even typically a bigger influx of what's called the Sun Belt, for example. Tons of people from New York move to Florida as an example, and just things like that. And then the market, for weather could be the reverse too. Okay, so some of the areas are going to be more coastal areas. So maybe they have the hurricanes and things like that. So even though the weather might be nice, might be sunny and warm, they also may contend with, again, like things like hurricanes, and that can potentially significantly increase your insurance costs at the property. We've seen some markets where we've owned and it's gone. I mentioned an example in step one where it was, from 600,000 to 3.6 million, which is extreme, obviously, but we've seen 300% increases in a single year. And we even saw a 38% increase on a deal that we have in the Arizona area, which is a bit ridiculous. They don't really have weather there, but they're trying to make up for the other impacts from other areas that have had, the weather issues like hurricanes and hail and things like that. So weather can be a big indicator. Tips to find deals: meet face to face. Man, meet the brokers face to face. This concept of everything over the phone won't work overall. Um, it's a good way to start. The concept of hey, I'm having a conversation with a broker. I'm newer to multifamily. I want to take you to coffee or lunch or whatever it might be. The brokers don't make any money, at coffee or lunch. I'm not saying they don't go to coffee and don't go to lunch, but think of it this way. They're in it to make money. That's their job. That's their occupation. So if you're going to go to a market, in some cases you might have to jump on a plane, right? Go to a market and you're trying to develop a relationship with a broker. Really what you want to do is look to see what properties they have available for sale, right? And that could include, maybe it's a deal that you're not overly interested in, but it's in a market that you're interested in. Maybe it's smaller than you want, maybe it's more expensive than you want. Doesn't matter. But you call the broker and say, hey, I see you have, property ABC listed. I'm going to be coming in town and want to see if I can tour it. And then they're never going to say no. I mean, I've never had a broker ever say no, you can't go tour the property, unless it's already been sold. But so they're looking at it from their perspective, like, oh, this is a potential buyer, legit, traveling out of town. If you want to take them to coffee or lunch after that or ask them if they can, great, but don't start there. I hear it all the time, and it's just not a good move in my mind. Do your homework up front. Don't go visit a tour property with a broker and say, I had a partner from, I guess it's been 10 years, over 10 years now. And we go tour properties and you say, how many units is this? And I'm thinking to myself, seriously, dude, like we're touring a property and you don't know how many units this property is. And they'll ask other questions. Brokers put together what's called an OM, offering memorandum, typically. Fancy brochure with a bunch of content and data in there. And I'm not saying you have to memorize all that, but in my personal opinion, I say don't ask the silly questions. You just look completely unprepared. You do want to ask really good questions, and there are good questions to ask, but how many units are here at the property is not a good question to ask. Have a qualified partner or partners. Selling broker is going to want to know how you're going to do a loan, how you bring your capital, equity to the deal, those type of things. What's your experience? How many deals have you closed? All those things. Have your story nailed down, exactly what you're looking for. It's okay to have your story nailed down with your criteria. And if the brokers don't have anything or they're trying to propose something that doesn't meet criteria, it's okay to be upfront with them. It doesn't really fit my box because of XYZ. They'd rather have you be transparent with them than, dragging them along, right? Don't waste brokers' time. Don't call them all the day, every day. What do you have going on? Don't call them up. I mean, people say this all the time and ask all the time. Hey, I'm new to the multifamily. I want your off-market deals. Okay, I'm not saying it's impossible to get the off-market deals, but that's not probably not where you're going to start. Again, these brokers, some of these brokers have been in business. We deal with, 20, 30 years. They have their handful of buyers in their market that they're gonna do business with. Some cases we've done. There's probably one firm out of Atlanta area we've probably done 30 deals with. A lot. So you can imagine we're at top on their list when they have something coming to market. And but that's the advantage. Partner up with somebody else that's already been there, done that. You can leverage their track record as well. Potentially partner up with them. Market size, how big is the market? There was a friend of mine looking at potentially investing in a deal, and the city has 12,000 people in it. He's newer to multifamily. Not saying it's a bad deal at all. I think every deal can work for the right price, but you have to consider that. It's a very, very small market. Crime, it's not just crime on the property, which can be a problem. You think like, hey, there's a murder, and you're like, oh my gosh, should people get murdered on properties? Yes, they do. Even in Class A properties, people get murdered. It's not, happening all the time, and fires will happen, and theft will happen, and arson, and things like that, right? That can have a big impact on how willing a lender is to provide a debt on the property. They might be, if you have a property, and let's just say you bring it to your mortgage broker, brings it to, let's say 10, 12 different lenders, and you have one lender interested. Personal opinion, probably not a good deal. We've done deals like that before. I'm not doing them anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Maybe there's other physical characteristics of it, but crime is a big thing. It's not even crime necessarily only at the property. We had a couple of properties that we bought in Georgia, and crime on the property is super low, like pretty much non-existent. But the submarket had high crime, and that was a problem for loans. We still got loans, but it was a problem. Unit size, meaning how many square feet is a given unit, and why does it matter really? Two things, if you buy small, let's say studios, like there was a guy showed me a deal about a week ago, 100 units, but it's actually converted to hotels, so they're all like studios, right? Just very transient. It just is. But also, some of the agencies like Fannie, Freddie, things like that, if the units are below a certain square footage, they won't even loan on the property. So you might be required to go to, for example, bridge debt or maybe a bank loan. I'm not saying either of those are bad options, but all things being equal, I would take an agency debt, Fannie and Freddie, over a bridge or a bank loan. I just would. This is a real deal. It's a $54 million deal, which is, obviously huge. I was asked to partner on this deal. It was bizarre to me. A broker reached out to me, and this is a while ago. I said, yeah, I'll look at the deal. And the guy that he already had an LOI, like a letter of intent, accepted. Guy had basically done no homework. These are like legit questions I asked him. Do you have a PM budget? No. You have insurance quote? No. Property tax, consultant? No. Had no equity lined up. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's ridiculous, right? He had 3 other deals going under contract and actually made an offer on a deal that I was selling at the time about 2 weeks later. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same guy. So, nobody typically I shouldn't say nobody. Typically, someone like this, first of all, doesn't even know how to, the steps for it. They don't have endless money. Just making offers out there and going to get burned, right? Not going to even close on any of these deals, even if he gets them. And then I made one change. The only change I made was and it was a market I was familiar with. I adjusted the property taxes, and you'll see his underwriting, his average rate of return was 8%. His internal rate of return was 22.7, and his total return was 113. I took his exact same numbers as is, didn't change anything with the exception, again, of property taxes, knowing what they're going to go to. Made that one change. Average rate of return went down to a negative 13%. Internal rate of return went down to a negative 10%. Total return went down by negative 50%, making one change, property taxes. So obviously, knowing what you need to know what you're doing for one, how this guy is out there looking at $54 million deals blows my mind. He should not be looking at $54 million deals, at least on his own without help. Reality is he's going to, get a bad reputation in the market and brokers aren't going to deal with him. Cap rates. So why is it important? It's going to be used to help value a deal. So if you think of multifamily as a business, like any other business, you have NOI, net operating income, gives me all my revenue that coming in. That's rents and other income, pet fees, and other things like that, minus all my expenses, but not including my mortgage. So revenue minus expenses, not including my mortgage, divide by a cap rate, which I'll come back to in a moment here. That's going to give you a value or what the property is worth. Why is it important? Well, if you take the NOI and divide it by, say it's $1, right? Divide it by a 5 cap, that's $20 of value. Okay. If you divide it by a 10 cap, $1 by 10 cap, that's $10 of value. Meaning you can have two properties, businesses, right? Properties generating the exact same NOI. And in one market, it could sell for twice as much as the other market. And the only difference is, generally speaking, right? Performance-wise, revenue and expenses and NOI, identical. The only difference being where it's located. And the cap rate will control that. And what's happening in the market. Cap rates work both ways, right? Cap rates go down, everyone's a genius, right? Property values that you bought, went way up. If cap rates go up, then that means your value of the properties are going down. So the reverse works. But it's very, very important. It's critical. And it's not really critical unless you're buying a property, right? Or you're exiting a property. Exiting could be selling the property. I mean, you're trying to refinance or do a supplemental loan, then cap rates can become important there. But if you bought a property, let's say a 4 cap, which was what it was a few years ago in a lot of markets, and then cap rates go to like a 7.5. I mean, you're way upside down, like horribly upside down. But if it's still, you have fixed long-term debt, still cash flowing, you're kind of like, okay, we'll wait it out, right? The cap rate isn't going to impact what my cash flow is, right? The cap rate again is going to tell me what the property is valued at and what somebody in the market would pay for it. Well, if I'm not selling, then I don't care. If I'm refinancing, I care, but I might be like, well, I can't refinance, so I'm just going to stay in the current debt I have. Again, if you have long-term debt, you can do that. So that's very, very important. And just a term, cap rate isn't just multifamily, right? But it's a measure of a return on something if you paid all cash for it. So if I paid $10 million cash for a building, what would be my return on that? That's giving my cap rate. You have the submarket cap rate. That's other properties in the market, right? I have property ABC and there are 10 other properties around me. What are they sold for? What are they selling for? Account for things like location, demographics, property class. You have zero control over what cap rates are. The market will dictate it and set it, just the way it is. You have the subject property cap rate, which is in place. You take the current NOI, net operating income, on the T12, which is the profit and loss, and divide by the sales price. The big major downside to this approach is you're taking the T12 or profit and loss from the current seller. Well, it might be completely different when you buy the property, meaning maybe your property taxes are going to go way up when you buy the property because you're paying way more than what other guy paid for. Maybe other things are going to happen where they're self-managing, but you're going to bring in a property management company, third party, and you're going to have to pay them, things like that. It's a data point. It's just a data point. And but then you're going to have adjusted meaning, okay, I'm going to take what the current operator has, owner, right? Look at their revenue, their expenses, but then I'm going to make adjustments to that based on a couple things: industry standards, other knowledge you have about other properties you might own in the market, getting engaged with the property management company or companies to give you budgets independently. You compare all those data points and go, oh, I need to adjust my expenses up, my insurance is going up, my payroll is going down, property taxes are going up. End of the day, what does my adjusted T12 look like? Critical that you do that. Economic vacancy, what is it really? It's a physical. So 100 units and 90 are occupied. My physical occupancy is 90%. Physical vacancy is 10%. You have concessions, giving discounts to people to move in, things like that. Loss to lease, that just means, let's say I'm charging $1,500 a month for a unit and someone's paying $1,300 a month, meaning there's a $200 delta between what I, as the owner, telling people what the market rent for this property itself, but someone didn't give me that much. So I have this loss to lease, and you have bad debt where people, don't pay. So you will see properties that are even 95% occupied, but depending on the market, depending on how bad it is, people paying, depending on what's going on, COVID, things like that happened, you could be 70% economic occupancy, which is horrible, right? So if you look at all these, physical vacancy, if the as a submarket is, high, then that's something you can, typically improve on. Concessions, come and go. They just do. You need to be competitive. Typically, you might have to give them just because everyone else in the market's giving them. But there are ways to be smart about that. Loss to lease, if other people are paying, the market rent, my example, 1,500 and someone's paying 1,300, it is what it is. Maybe they lived there before we raise rents. Maybe they've been there for 20 years. You don't want to actually go in and have to, put $25,000 of improvements in their unit. So maybe you let some of that slide. Maybe you increase the rent a little bit, but not quite to market, things like that. My personal opinion, I don't want to say it's a personal opinion. I think it's probably should be stated more as a fact. Bad debt is the worst part of economic vacancy. Very difficult to change tenant profile, very difficult to change tenant mindset. They've been used to slipping, and not really being, you want to say, penalized for it. The on-site property manager has just allowed things to happen that shouldn't happen, and people are late all the time, bad debt, not paying, evictions taking forever. We had properties that were taking, 16 plus months to evict. This is post-COVID, by the way. It wasn't even during COVID. And so bad debt just piled up. So it's very, very difficult to fix that one. And I kind of went through some of the reasons why it's important. And does it matter which category? In my opinion, yes, it does. Income growth, double-digit income growth for multiple years. Is it warranted? No. I mean, it's not. After stabilization, if you see like a 2 to 3% organic rent growth, there are projections that large companies put together. You probably know as well as I do, projections are what they are, whether it's economists that do it for a living, been doing it for 40, 50 years. They're still wrong all the time on a regular basis. So be careful about your rent increases. Assuming 100% of the renovated units in year one, people are gung-ho, I'm going to go in, renovate all the units. In a year, very difficult to do that, depending on what you're doing, but just takes time. Everything takes time and longer than you expect. In some cases, costs more. You need to stage in other income growth. People will sometimes say, I'm going to do RUBS, which is billing, it's ratio utility billing system. Where you're going to bill back for water, as an example. Well, you can't just go in and do that if the current owner wasn't doing that. You can do it on new leases and then renewals, but you can't do it on the people already living there. So it takes, it takes some time to do there. It's going to take a year. All things being equal, every unit turns, right? Within a year, it take a year to get that in there. So you have to phase that in. Working capital contingency, what are they? I mean, they're pretty much the same in my mind. I mean, obviously different definitions, but at the end of the day, how much extra money do I have that I can use to do things if I need it? And you usually want to have for certain categories, maybe it's like for contingency for CapEx. So maybe it's a 20% contingency. Probably sounds high. It's not. But you want to do that contingency for that. Maybe it's like, well, maybe we have certain things we have to buy, like a bond for, it's like a utility bond that can be expensive. In some cases, you're going to have maybe you have bad months, tenants aren't paying, Christmas time, people don't want to pay, whatever it might be. How much is enough? I mean, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. The CapEx, are you raising money for capital improvements in the property? Is the lender holding that money? If the lender's holding it, do you have to pay your vendors before the lender reimburse you? We've had countless examples where we've waited months and months for lenders to reimburse us for legit vendor invoices already paid. Why do they do that? I don't know. Can they do that? They do whatever they want. Just face it. But those are things you want to have extra money sitting there. Revenue, expenses. What is the income growth? Once stabilized, what it look like? What the break even? Occupancy, break even rents, and stress test that. What are the expense assumptions? Not assuming property tax increases for a lot of markets. That's a big issue. You need to, again, engage a tax consultant to help you with that. Even if you don't have it today, doesn't mean you're not going to have it. Some markets, like I mentioned, they reassess every 4 years. So depending when you came into that cycle, you could be good for 4 more years, right? You might be at 3.5 years into the 4 year cycle. And then after 6 months of ownership, you're going to be reassessed property taxes. Maybe not assuming insurance increases. Some markets gone up a lot. Cash versus accrual, accounting, and you don't have to be a CPA to understand this or even really understand accounting that much to understand it. But this is a critical, probably the most critical aspect of profit and loss you can look at. So think of a seller giving you their profit and loss. Again, it's a trailing 12 for the last 12 months of revenue, expenses, things like that. And on there you see revenue, and then you see things like we've seen examples like where destruction, right? Fees and vandalism, the fees. I mean, they're charging, tenants. I'm like, okay, so the tenant moved out, they vandalized the unit, they didn't pay you rent, but you think you're going to go after them and collect for the damage they did on the unit? Probably not going to happen. Even if you win a case, you're not going to get the money, most likely. So, well, on accrual based accounting, it would show that they collected that income. And you're like, well, it's not that too big of a deal. Well, there was I think it was $24,000 example on a deal we looked at in Georgia area, and at that point in time with the cap rate, it was about a $430 turnaround in them, if you want to say overpricing the property because of this one line item on their trailing 12 using accrual. If you ask them for cash basis, first of all, they might say, oh, we can't do cash basis. That's baloney in my mind. QuickBooks does it. Your software doesn't do it, that your PM company uses. And if you get cash basis, you would see in some cases drastic differences. Now, with that said, you also don't want to have a T12 where you see property taxes 0.0000 for, let's say, all 12 months because they paid it in the 13th month. And you're looking at the T12 and not paying attention. You're like, oh my gosh, this NOI is like really high. This looks like an awesome deal. Well, yeah, let's go look at property taxes and insurance, and you see all these zeros. Well, you want to accrue for things like that property taxes and insurance should be accrued like 1/12 per month to help, show a legit NOI. But with income, my personal opinion, hands down, without a doubt, you want it to show cash-based income. Business plan, what has to go right? So assuming multiple things, can't tell you how many people would send me deals and go, oh, we're going to do solar, internet, reserve parking, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, well, what if you took all that out? Would the deal still work? No. Okay, well, I wouldn't assume that. Those are nice things to have and to add, without a doubt. But if your business plan only works by you doing those things, probably not a good deal. Only getting one PM budget. You want to get typically multiple PM budgets, unless you're really familiar with the market and have a PM company that's really familiar with the market you've used before. You want to typically get, a couple, two, three property management budgets independently so you can compare what they're saying. If there are things out of whack, you want to go back to them and ask why. Why did you not do that? Some cases like, oh, we just took what was on the T12. You mean you took what's on the T12 for the current owner? Yes. Okay, well, don't do that. I want you what you really think is going to be when we take over the property. And then, basically assuming you can do all those things, but also increase rents. It's hard to do all these things. And there's a mindset too, right? I mean, people at some point in time, their breaking point, if you say, I'm going to add all these things and start charging all these fees day one and increase rent, you could do it maybe if other people in the some market's doing it, but if not, it's going to be pretty difficult to do it. Has a property manager provided a budget? I went through some of that already. Do they understand your business plan? If you say, hey, give me a budget without any other detail, if you say, hey, give me a budget, I'm going to be putting to 100 units, 40 of the units, we're going to put $20,000 a unit of CapEx to. We're going to do granite countertops, quartz, whatever it is. We're putting, stainless appliances. We're doing new flooring, LED lights, blah, 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 right? Well, that's a good data point. First of all, they might say, well, I wouldn't do that in this market because you won't get your bang for the buck. They could tell you that. But also, you would never really do all those things. You shouldn't, unless you're going to get a rent bump that more than compensates for the increase in that. So be careful on those type of things. Our capital event assumption is realistic. So I've seen examples where people put deals together. They literally have multiple refis happening. So let's say we're going to hold for 7 years. We're going to do refi after year 2, another refi after year 4. Then we're going to get in permanent debt and we're going to do a supplemental loan 2 years after that. And then we're going to sell it in year 7. I mean, it's just like, really? Like, not saying it's not possible, but it's not practical. It's not realistic. So understanding that. And then people sometimes will assume a loan and it's already fixed agency debt. Fannie, Freddie is an example, and they say we're going to refinance it after like 2 years. I mean, you might, you very well could, but again, really, I mean, you already have long-term debt, so you might not do that. Now, it depends how much term is left on the debt and things like that. I mean, I wouldn't get into a deal where there's 2 years left on a loan assumption, and then you're going to be stuck 2 years after that trying to figure out what to do with the property. I wouldn't even do that as a buyer. Is the assumed exit price realistic? I've seen people buying properties for $80,000 a unit, and then assuming 5 years later they're going to sell it for $170,000 a unit. I mean, not saying it's not possible, but that's pretty unrealistic of happening. So I would not assume. And then what is the interest rate, assumption? So.